the rancher's
I beg you,
proposal, and the
reconsider.
horror they are unable
You
to
cannot
escape.
just walk away as if
The
these
ranch
years
stretched
meant
along the
nothing.
edge of a forest, ancient trees twisting into dark shapes that seemed to watch all who passed. Ilarion, the rancher, moved among his cattle, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. His hands, calloused and steady, guided the animals with quiet authority. He had lived here all his life, in the shadow of a curse that was whispered about but never spoken aloud. Ilarion's father had been a quiet man, stern and kind in turns, who had left behind a ranch both blessed and cursed. The land was fertile, but strange events often occurred. Animals disappearing, sudden storms, whispers in the woods. Ilarion had learned long ago not to question it too closely. The forest was alive in ways the eye could not see. He paused, looking toward the edge of the woods. The trees swayed even though the wind had died down. Something moved among them. He squinted, but all he saw was shadow. A part of him, the cautious part that had kept him alive through so many winters, tensed. Something was coming. The sound of hooves echoed across the damp grass. Ilarion turned and saw a figure approaching the ranch, a woman riding a small, tired horse. Her cloak was dark, soaked from the mist that clung to the valley. Her face was pale but strong, and her eyes held a mixture of fear and determination. She slowed her horse as she neared the gate. Ilarion stepped forward, his expression guarded. "Who are you? And why are you on this land?" His voice was steady but firm, carrying the weight of someone used to keeping strangers at a distance. "My name is Isolde," the woman said, her voice trembling slightly yet filled with quiet resolve. "I need shelter. I have nowhere else to go." Ilarion studied her. There was something in her presence that unsettled him, something that felt familiar. Not in memory, but in some deeper, instinctual way. The air between them seemed to thrum with energy, a subtle tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. "You've come far," he said finally, "but you should know this place is not safe for strangers." "I know," Isolde replied, her eyes flicking to the dark edge of the forest. "And yet something told me I had to come here. I felt drawn." Ilarion frowned, unsettled. The wind shifted again, carrying a whisper that sounded almost like her name. He shook his head. He would not speak of such things. The forest had ways of drawing people in, ways that could destroy them. Yet, against his better judgment, he gestured toward the barn. "You can stay there, for tonight." Isolde nodded, dismounting carefully. The horse whinnied softly, stamping its hooves in the mud. She tied it to a post and followed Ilarion toward the barn, her movements graceful despite the obvious weariness. The smell of hay and animals filled the air, grounding them in the reality of the ranch. As they worked together to settle the horse and prepare a small corner for her, a silence hung between them. Not an awkward silence, but one heavy with unspoken questions. Ilarion's life had been one of solitude, shaped by the demands of the land and the shadow of the forest. Yet he felt a strange pull toward this woman, a curiosity he could not explain. Night fell quickly in the highlands. The sky darkened to a deep blue, stars appearing like pinpricks of light. Ilarion showed Isolde to a small room above the barn, simple but warm, with a single window looking out toward the forest. She thanked him, her voice soft, almost like a melody in the quiet night. "I have not had a visitor in years," Ilarion said, standing by the doorway. He hesitated, then added, "and none that I could trust." Isolde's lips curved slightly, a hint of a smile. "Then perhaps this night can begin something new." He nodded, though he did not speak further. Outside, the forest seemed to shift, as if listening. The wind carried strange whispers, faint and fleeting, and Isolde thought she saw movement among the trees. She blinked, and it was gone. Later, Ilarion returned to the barnyard. The moon hung low, casting long shadows over the fields. He walked slowly, alert, feeling the familiar prickle of unease that came with nightfall. The cattle were restless, pawing at the ground, their eyes reflecting the pale light. A sudden noise made him freeze. Something large moved in the darkness near the forest edge. A wolf. A shadow, his hand went instinctively to the knife at his belt, though he knew it might not be enough. "Isolde," he called softly, but there was no reply. He took a careful step forward. The air felt heavier here, charged with energy. He could almost hear the forest breathing, listening. And then he saw it, a shadow, tall and thin, moving against the grain of the trees. It was not quite human, not quite animal. His heart pounded. And then the whisper came, clear this time. Not carried by the wind, but inside his mind. Ilarion, he spun around, but the barn was empty. Isolde was asleep, he was certain. The shadow melted into the trees, leaving only the echo of the whisper. Ilarion returned to the barn, restless and uneasy. He did not sleep that night. Instead, he watched over the ranch, the fire crackling low in the hearth, his mind returning again and again to the strange woman who had come to his land. Morning brought no relief. Mist clung to the fields and the forest seemed closer somehow, its edges darker than ever. Isolde appeared at breakfast, her hair damp from the morning dew, her eyes alert. "I had strange dreams," she said softly, stirring her tea. "I thought I was walking in the forest and something called my name." Ilarion frowned, understanding too well. "The forest tests people," he said. "It senses fear, curiosity, desire, sometimes all three at once." Isolde looked at him, her expression a mixture of fear and fascination. "And you," she asked, "have you felt it?" He hesitated. The truth was heavy, a weight he had carried his entire life. "I have," he admitted finally, "and it does not let go." They fell into a quiet rhythm over the next days. Isolde helped with chores, learning the routines of the ranch. Ilarion found himself watching her, noting the way she moved, how her laughter sometimes cut through the oppressive silence of the land. He wanted to speak, to share the truths he had hidden for so long, but the words caught in his throat. At night, they would sit near the fire, talking of ordinary things, the cattle, the storms, the beauty of the highlands. And yet beneath it all there was tension, a quiet pull between them neither could fully name. The forest seemed aware of it, shifting and whispering, as though encouraging something dark and inevitable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Isolde wandered toward the forest. Ilarion called after her, but she did not hear him. The trees loomed tall and foreboding, their shadows stretching toward her like long fingers. "Isolde," he shouted, running toward her. She turned at the sound of his voice, her eyes wide. "I heard something, I thought someone was calling me." Ilarion reached her just as a branch cracked sharply behind them. Both froze. The air felt colder, heavier. A shadow moved in the corner of his vision, vanishing as soon as he turned to look. "This forest," he said, his voice low and urgent, "it does not like strangers, and it does not forgive easily." Isolde looked at him, a mixture of fear and defiance in her gaze. "Then we must face it together," she said, almost daring him to refuse. Ilarion's jaw tightened. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from the darkness that clung to this land. Yet, deep inside, he knew that some forces could not be kept at bay by caution alone. As night fell again, they returned to the ranch, the forest behind them alive with whispers and movement. Ilarion could not shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. He glanced at Isolde, who seemed unaware of the danger yet drawn to it, as if some invisible thread pulled her toward the darkness. He sighed, a sound heavy with both fear and longing. For the first time in years, the ranch did not feel like his alone. And for the first time, he feared that the shadows of the past might reach forward to claim more than just the land. The moon rose, silver and pale, casting a glow on the fields. Somewhere at the edge of the forest, a figure moved silently. A whisper curled through the night, soft and insistent, Ilarion, and in that moment he knew. The arrival of the woman was only the beginning. The forest had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed brought an uneasy rhythm to the ranch. Ilarion and Isolde worked side by side, tending the fields and guiding the cattle, their movements slowly falling into sync. Every sunrise brought a quiet beauty to the highlands, with mists curling over the pastures and sunlight painting the tips of the ancient forest in gold. Yet beneath the serene surface, something restless stirred in the shadows, something that watched and waited. Ilarion had always preferred solitude. The land had been his only companion, the quiet of the ranch his only comfort. Yet Isolde's presence brought an unfamiliar warmth to the empty spaces of his days. He found himself speaking more than he usually did, explaining the routines of the ranch, the quirks of certain animals, the subtle signs of coming storms. And she listened, absorbing each word with an intensity that made him uneasy and strangely pleased. "You know this land well," Isolde said one afternoon as they worked in the field, her hands brushing the soil as she sowed seeds. Her voice carried a hint of awe. "It feels alive, as if it has its own heart." Ilarion wiped the sweat from his brow and studied her. "It does," he said carefully, "but not all its heart is kind. Some of it is dangerous. You should never forget that." She looked up at him, her dark eyes wide. "I am not afraid," she said, though the whisper of fear in her voice betrayed her. "I want to understand it, to see what lives here in this quiet and the shadows." He felt a pang of worry. There was curiosity in her words that mirrored his own, the same dangerous pull that had always drawn him to the forest's edge. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he warned, his tone soft but firm. "Then I will take the risk," she replied, a faint smile brushing her lips. Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened. They shared quiet meals, long walks along the edge of the forest, and evenings by the fire in the barn, where stories of past winters and old legends were traded like fragile treasures. The ranch seemed to hum with life around them, yet the forest remained a dark presence, always just beyond the fields, watching. One evening, while the sky burned with the colors of sunset, Isolde followed Ilarion to the old barn near the forest. He had discovered an old, weathered journal buried beneath a pile of hay. Its leather cover was cracked, and its pages smelled of earth and age. "This belonged to your father?" she asked softly, her fingers tracing the letters etched into the worn leather. "No," Ilarion admitted. "It belonged to my grandfather. He wrote of the land, of the curse, of the things that live in the forest. I never thought anyone would read it. It was private." Isolde opened the journal carefully, the pages brittle under her touch. She read aloud, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "The forest does not forgive. It waits. It watches. The blood of those who claim the land binds the shadow. Love may break it or strengthen it." Ilarion's jaw tightened at her words. "It is true," he said, his voice low. "The forest senses what is human, what is vulnerable. Anyone who comes here awakens it. And sometimes it tests them through fear, through desire, through the connections they form." Isolde's gaze met his, and for a moment neither spoke. The firelight flickered across their faces, illuminating the tension that had grown between them. It was no longer merely curiosity that bound them. It was something deeper, a pull neither could resist, a connection that terrified and thrilled them at once. The night grew darker and the forest seemed to lean closer to the barn. Whispers curled through the trees, faint, teasing, almost like voices from the past. Isolde shivered and looked toward the shadows. "Do you hear it?" she asked. Ilarion nodded, his face grim. "It speaks sometimes, not always in words you can understand, but in feeling, in presence. The forest knows you, it tests you." She swallowed and stepped closer to him. "Then we face it together," she said. "I am not afraid if you are by my side." For a brief moment, Ilarion felt a surge of something he had long buried, hope, or perhaps trust. He nodded silently, though the weight of his doubts remained heavy on his shoulders. The following morning, a strange calm lay over the ranch. The air was thick with mist, and the forest edge seemed to breathe softly in the rising sun. They worked quietly, tending the cattle and repairing the fences, but both were aware of the subtle movements in the shadows, the faint rustling that suggested the forest was watching. Ilarion decided they needed to know more. He led Isolde to a clearing he rarely visited, where a small stone altar stood, overgrown with moss and roots. It had been there for as long as he could remember, a relic from some time before his family had claimed the land. "This is where the forest is strongest," he said. "Where the whispers are loudest, be careful." Isolde stepped forward, her fingers brushing the cold stone. "It feels alive," she murmured, "like it remembers everything." Ilarion studied her, noting the mixture of fear and fascination in her eyes. "It does," he said softly, "and it remembers everyone who has walked here, every choice, every longing, every sorrow. It remembers me too, and it will not forgive my mistakes." She turned to him, her hand still resting on the stone. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach me what to see, what to feel, what to understand. I want to be ready for it, whatever comes." The days grew darker still as the forest began to assert its presence more boldly. Livestock disappeared without explanation. Shadows shifted unnaturally. Ilarion would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps near the barn, only to find no one there. Yet, through all of this, the bond between him and Isolde deepened. They shared small moments of intimacy. The warmth of hands brushing while feeding the animals, the quiet conversations under the stars, the subtle glances that spoke more than words ever could. Each moment carried tension, a mixture of longing and fear, but neither dared to name it fully. One evening, a storm rolled in, thunder echoing through the highlands. Ilarion and Isolde hurried to secure the cattle, their movements synchronized, almost effortless. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in brief, terrifying bursts. In one flash, Isolde glimpsed something at the forest edge, a figure tall and thin, standing perfectly still, watching. She gasped. Ilarion turned toward her. "Did you see it?" he asked, his voice tense. She nodded, unable to speak. The wind carried a whisper that made her shiver, soft but insistent. Isolde, Ilarion's hand found hers instinctively, squeezing it tightly. "It's the forest," he said. "It's testing us. Do not let it frighten you. It wants to draw fear from you, to twist your thoughts. Trust me." Isolde looked at him, fear and trust mingling in her eyes. "I do," she said. The storm raged through the night, the wind bending the trees, rain hammering against the barn. They stayed close together, watching over the ranch, each aware of the other's presence as a lifeline. In the heart of the storm, they spoke little, but the silence itself was a bond. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving a strange calm over the land. The forest seemed to retreat slightly, though its presence remained, lurking at the edges of vision. Isolde stepped outside, feeling the wet grass beneath her feet, and looked toward the barn. Ilarion was watching her, a small smile touching his lips, but his eyes were shadowed with worry. "Why do you stay?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "Why do you remain here in a place that is haunted?" Ilarion's gaze followed hers toward the forest. "Because it is mine," he said quietly. "Because someone must, and because I cannot leave, not yet." She moved closer, her hand brushing his arm. "Then we face it together," she said again. "I will not let it take you or this place, not if I can help it." He looked at her, the weight of the forest, the curse, and his own fears pressing down on him. Yet in her words he found a strange comfort, a promise that perhaps he was not alone in this battle. As evening fell, the forest seemed to watch them, its whispers curling around the edges of the ranch. The shadows moved, but for the first time, Ilarion felt a measure of hope. The forest was testing them, yes, but perhaps with trust and courage they could survive it. Yet as the moon rose high, silver and pale, a figure appeared at the forest's edge. Isolde froze, sensing it before she saw it clearly. In the faint glow, she could make out a shadowy form, herself, but not herself, smiling with a calm that was unnatural and chilling. The forest had made its first move, and its game had only begun. The forest waited. Its ancient trees swayed even when the wind lay still, their branches creaking like old bones. Shadows stretched along the paths, moving with purpose. Ilarion and Isolde stood at the edge of the clearing, staring into the dark heart of the woods. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of moss, wet earth, and something else, something older, something alive. "Are you ready?" Ilarion asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. His hand brushed against hers, a silent question of trust. Isolde nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "I am. We face it together, right?" "Yes," he said, though his jaw tightened. Deep down, he feared the forest more than he had ever feared anything. It was not merely trees and shadows. It was memory and sorrow, longing and loss, all twisted into a single consciousness that could read hearts. They stepped into the forest together. The ground was soft, covered in fallen leaves and tangled roots. The light from the clearing faded quickly, swallowed by the dense canopy above. Strange noises echoed around them, whispers, rustling, faint footsteps, yet there was no one else visible. Every step seemed measured, every breath watched. As they walked deeper, the forest began to shift. The path seemed to twist, returning them to places they had already passed. Shadows stretched into shapes of people they had known, moments they could not forget. Ilarion stopped abruptly. "Look," he said, pointing to a figure among the trees. Isolde squinted. A girl, perhaps a child, stood there, her face familiar. It was a vision from the past, Ilarion's younger sister, lost to illness years ago. She smiled at him, but her eyes were hollow. "Ilarion," the figure whispered. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to look away. "Do not trust it," he warned. "The forest will twist memories, desires, anything it can use to trap you." Isolde reached for his hand again. "We can't turn back now, not after everything." Together they pressed onward. The trees grew taller, darker, closing in around them. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, echoing from every direction. Sometimes they were words, sometimes only feelings: fear, doubt, longing, regret. "Isolde," a voice called, soft and lilting. She froze, looking around. It sounded like her own voice, yet distant and strange. "Come closer, you belong here." She shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "I belong with him." Her eyes met Ilarion's, and he nodded, proud of her strength. Suddenly, the forest shifted again. They found themselves in a clearing bathed in a pale, unnatural light. The ground was covered with silver leaves, shimmering like frost. At the center stood a stone altar, similar to the one back at the ranch, but larger, more imposing. It pulsed with a strange energy, resonating in their bones. "This is the heart of the forest," Ilarion said. His voice was grave. "This is where it will test us. It will show us our fears, our weaknesses, and the truth of our hearts." Isolde stepped closer, feeling a mix of awe and fear. "And what if we fail?" "We won't," Ilarion said, though even as he spoke, a shadow flickered across his face. "But it will try to break us. Everything we feel, every bond we have, it will try to twist against us." The shadows moved. They took the shape of people from their past, moments they had wished to forget. Ilarion saw his father's disappointed eyes, his mother's gentle smile, his sister's laughter. Isolde saw herself as a child, lonely and afraid, chased by shadows of nobles and strangers who had sought to control her life. The forest whispered to them, tugging at their hearts. "You will fail," it said. "You are not enough. You cannot save each other." Ilarion gripped Isolde's hand. "Do not listen. None of it is real." The forest responded, twisting its illusions. The shadows of their past stepped closer, merging into forms that were almost tangible, almost alive. Fear rose in their chests, threatening to overwhelm them. Ilarion closed his eyes. He remembered every hardship he had endured on the ranch, every night he had fought the shadows alone. He remembered why he protected the land, why he survived, and he opened his eyes, focusing entirely on Isolde. "Together," he whispered. Isolde nodded, drawing strength from him. She stepped forward, facing the illusions, the whispers, the shadows. "We are stronger than you," she said aloud, her voice clear and unwavering. "We face this together. You will not control us." For a moment the forest fell silent, as if considering their defiance. Then the shadows surged, darker and more insistent, pushing against their resolve. They were no longer merely illusions, they were tests of the heart. Ilarion felt a sudden pain in his chest, visions of failure flashing before his eyes. The ranch burned, the animals lost, Isolde taken by the forest. His fears clawed at him, seeking to separate him from the woman he had begun to trust completely. Isolde sensed his fear and she pressed closer. "I am here," she said softly. "We face it together, trust me." Her words cut through the shadows, a light in the darkness. The illusions faltered, the whispers weakened, but the forest was not yet defeated. It rose higher, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching like claws. Then a new voice joined the others, one Ilarion did not expect, his own, speaking to him. "Love cannot save her. You are cursed. You will bring her pain." He shook his head violently. "No, I will not believe it, not if I am with her." Isolde saw the struggle in his eyes, the weight of the curse that had always bound him to the land. She took his face gently in her hands. "Look at me," she said. "We are more than the past, more than the shadows. You are not alone anymore. We choose each other." Something shifted in the forest then. The shadows recoiled, the whispers faltered, but the forest was not defeated. From the darkness, a single figure emerged, a shadow shaped like Isolde herself, smiling, calm, and chilling in its stillness. It pointed toward Ilarion, a silent accusation in its gesture. Isolde gasped, stepping back. That's me." Ilarion grabbed her hand, pulling her close. "It's an illusion. Do not let it scare you. It's trying to separate us, to twist what we feel into fear." The shadow advanced, and the forest seemed to pulse with its power. Ilarion's heart ached as he realized the truth the forest wanted him to see. The curse was tied to him, to his bloodline, to every choice he had ever made. Loving Isolde fully could awaken the darkness in ways he could not control. He felt a surge of desperation. "We cannot fail," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "We cannot let it win. We will face it together, no matter the cost." Isolde nodded, her eyes fierce with determination. "I am not afraid of you or it. We are together. That is stronger than any curse." The forest responded to their unity. The shadow faltered, flickering, its form unstable. The trees seemed to sway back, their branches less threatening. The whispers became distant, almost as if the forest were retreating. But the moment of triumph was fleeting. From the darkest part of the clearing, a deep, resonant voice boomed, shaking the ground beneath them. "You cannot escape the truth. You belong to this place, and one of you will pay the price." Ilarion felt his knees weaken, the weight of generations pressing down on him. Isolde's hand on his arm steadied him, but the fear was real, raw, and terrifying. They had survived the first trials, faced the illusions of the heart, yet the forest still held power over them. Isolde's voice was steady, though her eyes reflected the storm within. "We face it. Together, whatever it asks, we answer. We are not alone." Ilarion drew a deep breath, feeling the strength in her words. The forest pulsed around them, ancient and patient. They could not destroy it, but perhaps they could survive it. Perhaps together, they could find a way to redeem the land and themselves from the weight of the curse. For now, the heart of the forest had been confronted, but the price of their love and courage was not yet revealed. As the shadows receded and the clearing fell silent once more, Ilarion and Isolde stood hand in hand, aware of both the danger and the bond that had formed between them. The forest waited still, patient and eternal, and a whisper rode the wind, chilling and certain. The truth is coming, and one must choose. The forest was quiet, but its silence was not peace. It stretched before Ilarion and Isolde like a living wall, dark and endless. They stood at the clearing's edge, holding hands, hearts pounding, knowing that the forest's final challenge awaited them. The shadows had receded for now, but the weight of the curse hung heavy in the air, thick as the mist that clung to the highlands. Ilarion tightened his grip on Isolde's hand. "We cannot fail now," he said. His voice was low, strained with both fear and determination. Whatever happens, we face it together. Isolde nodded, drawing courage from his presence. We have come this far. We will not turn back. Not now, not ever. They stepped forward into the forest. The air was colder here, carrying whispers that wrapped around them like unseen hands. The path twisted, almost as if the trees themselves were guiding them deeper, leading them toward the heart of the curse. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the forest tested not just their bodies but their very souls. The clearing they had confronted before appeared once again, but it was different now. The stone altar glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the ground. The silver leaves rustled as if alive, and in the center of the clearing stood a figure, dark and shifting, the forest spirit, its presence towering, formidable, yet undeniably human in its movements. Ilarion felt a chill run down his spine. He had always known that the forest was alive, but now it seemed to breathe with intention, aware of every thought and fear they carried. The spirit spoke, its voice echoing from every direction, both gentle and terrifying. You have come far, Ilarion, and you, Isolde. You have felt fear, desire, and love, but the final truth remains. One must choose, one must sacrifice, or both will fall. Ilarion's heart sank. He had long feared that his love could endanger her, but now the forest demanded the confirmation of that fear. What must we do? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. You must confront your darkness, the spirit said. The curse is of your blood, Ilarion. You must give what is necessary, and only then can the land be free. But the price is yours to choose. Isolde looked at him, eyes wide but steady. We face it together, she said. Whatever the cost, we do not let the fear separate us. Ilarion nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The truth of his curse pressed down on him. The generations of pain, sorrow, and the forest's endless hunger for reckoning. He stepped forward, placing his hands on the altar. Pain surged through him, visions flashing in his mind. His ancestors, the land suffering, the animals lost, his own mistakes. The curse wanted him to feel despair, to falter. Isolde stepped beside him, placing her hands over his. Her warmth grounded him, her presence a shield against the darkness. You are not alone, she whispered. We are together. That is stronger than any curse. The forest responded, its whispers growing louder, now carrying voices from the past, voices of the lost and forgotten, voices that cried out for vengeance. Shadows rose around them, swirling in a vortex of black and silver, but Ilarion and Isolde stood firm. Together they were a single force, their bond stronger than the fear that sought to divide them. Then the forest spirit took shape more clearly. It was a towering figure, dark as night, yet with eyes that seemed to see into their hearts. You claim love as your strength, it said, but love alone cannot free you from the consequences of blood and choice. Ilarion clenched his fists. I will do whatever it takes, he said. I will face the darkness in myself, no matter the cost. The spirit moved closer, and the clearing seemed to shrink around them. Shadows licked at the edges of the light, testing their resolve. Visions of loss and failure attacked Ilarion's mind. The ranch in flames, Isolde taken, his own death. Fear gnawed at him, relentless. Isolde felt the same, but she held onto his hand, drawing strength from their shared resolve. We are stronger together, she said. Even if the darkness comes, we face it as one. Ilarion's mind cleared, focused solely on her. He saw that the curse had fed on isolation, fear, and doubt. By choosing love and trust over despair, he could weaken it. He pressed his palms firmly to the altar, letting the pain flow through him, embracing it rather than fighting it. The forest shivered in response, reacting to his courage and determination. The spirit spoke again, softer this time, almost admiring. Then you understand. Sacrifice is not always loss. Redemption comes not from destruction, but from the acceptance of what is. You may give, but you may also transform. Ilarion realized the truth in the words. He could not destroy the forest, nor could he escape the legacy of his bloodline. But he could channel it, offer himself willingly as a bridge between the land and the living, to heal rather than harm. With a deep breath, he stepped fully onto the altar. Pain shot through him, visions of the past and future colliding in his mind. He saw the forest as it truly was, ancient, wounded, angry, but capable of renewal. He felt the curse pulse within him, and with Isolde by his side, he opened his heart to it. Isolde leaned close, placing her forehead against his. "I am with you," she said. "We are together." "Always." A surge of light and shadow erupted from the altar, sweeping across the clearing. The trees bent, the silver leaves shimmered, and the shadows of fear, doubt, and sorrow were drawn into the vortex, transformed by the force of their bond. The forest howled, but not in anger, in release. Centuries of pain began to lift, leaving behind a quiet, steady heartbeat in the land. Ilarion gasped, his body trembling from the effort. He felt his strength waning, but Isolde held him upright. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." The spirit appeared once more, less imposing now, almost human in its form. Its eyes shone with a strange serenity. "You have chosen wisely," it said. "You have embraced both your darkness and your light. The curse is no longer a chain, but a legacy you may guide. The land may heal because you have healed yourselves." Ilarion sank to his knees, exhausted but alive. Isolde knelt beside him, holding him close. Tears filled their eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief and love. The forest had tested them, pushed them to the edge of fear and despair, yet they had endured. Together they had transformed the darkness into something new. Slowly the clearing brightened, the mist lifting. Sunlight broke through the canopy, warm and golden. The silver leaves glimmered one last time before settling into a calm green carpet. The shadows had receded, leaving the forest quiet, alive, but no longer threatening. Ilarion looked at Isolde, his voice hoarse but filled with gratitude. "I never thought I could survive this, not alone, but with you." He could not finish the sentence. The depth of his feelings was too great for words. Isolde smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "We are stronger together," she said simply. "And now the land is free, and we are free with it." For the first time in years, Ilarion felt the weight on his shoulders ease. The ranch, the forest, the curse, all of it was no longer a prison, but a home, a place they could nurture and protect together. Days passed, and the highlands slowly returned to normal. The cattle grazed peacefully, the wind sang through the trees, and the forest seemed content to watch silently from its edge. Ilarion and Isolde worked side by side, restoring the ranch and tending to the land that had survived centuries of sorrow. Their bond, forged in darkness and tested by fear, had become unbreakable. They laughed together, planned for the future, and shared quiet moments beneath the stars, where the forest no longer whispered threats but hummed a gentle, steady melody. And yet, the forest remained alive, eternal and patient. Occasionally, a shadow would move at the edge of vision, or a whisper would brush against the wind. But now, Ilarion and Isolde understood it. They did not fear it. They respected it, honoring the land that had shaped them, challenged them, and ultimately redeemed them. On one quiet evening, they stood together on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sun dipped low, painting the fields in gold and crimson. Ilarion wrapped his arm around Isolde, feeling her warmth beside him. "Do you think it will ever come back?" she asked softly, glancing toward the forest. Ilarion shook his head, though a small smile touched his lips. "Perhaps, but we are ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." Isolde rested her head on his shoulder. "Then we are truly free," she whispered. And for the first time the highlands seemed at peace. The curse had ended, the forest had accepted them, and the bond forged in darkness had emerged stronger, unshakable, and eternal. The wind carried a gentle whisper, faint and approving, as if the forest itself had granted its blessing. Ilarion and Isolde remained on the hill, hands entwined, hearts united, ready to face the future together, whatever it might hold. The forest waited still, but now it waited in quiet harmony, a guardian rather than a threat, as the highlands breathed freely beneath the sky. The horror of the past was gone. The love that had endured the darkness remained. And in the silence a promise lingered. Together they could survive anything.